Welcome to another episode of Real Deal Investing. I'm Jerron Kelley, my co-host Larry Mastropieri, and today we've got a great guest today. We got my good friend Mike Rechter. Mike, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
I love being here.
It's great. I haven't seen you in a little while too. It's been several months, so it's good to catch up.
It's nice to see you on any level, but obviously to be here with you today, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, and we were introduced by a mutual friend, our friend Jerry Katz, who's a great guy, great insurance broker, also investor, and just a good person overall.
Also been on the podcast as well.
And Jerry has a great podcast too. If you go back and look at our previous episode from a few months ago, he really dives deep into the Florida insurance industry and the issues that are going on. But we've met a couple times now, and each time we meet, we start to dive a little deeper into not just our professional careers, but also our personal lives and connected. So just you've become a friend, and again, I appreciate you coming on. So let's dive into some of the sort of your background here. Where are you from? How did you end up in real estate? What's the journey?
Oh, God. Well, I've been in Florida a kid since I was 5 years old. I was born in New York, but I moved down here as a young boy. So I'm more Floridian than New Yorker.
Of course, yeah.
Even though I tend to say I'm a New Yorker still. I don't know why. But when I was a kid, I was entrepreneurial. I always had an interest in business. I mean, money, business, capitalism, whatever you want to term it. As a kid, I was collecting baseball cards and would go to shows. And I remember that part of my life when I'm talking like, 10, 11, 12 years old. And then when I got a little bit older, I started to actually deal in them. I was selling them actually as a business. And my brother and I, and we didn't make a lot of money, but it taught me business skills that I actually probably, use today somewhat. And then as I got a little older, I just dabbled in different things. I was doing everything from like service businesses, car washing, auto detailing. And then in college, I started a bagel delivery business, which was actually a pretty good business.
That's cool.
Yeah, called Bagel Express.
Wow.
And
the first Uber Eats, really, but for bagels, yeah.
It was. The problem with it, that business, was you had to get up very early on a Saturday and Sunday morning.
So you had to miss all the parties,
right.
The college parties, yeah.
So that died.
Yeah. That'll kill your dating regime, so yeah.
But the point is that I was interested in business, and I was interested in just doing things, entrepreneurially, and that's really was the beginning of my business career, really. But I didn't have a direction, and my dad, I grew up upper middle class. I went to a nice school, and my dad pushed us into medicine because that's what he knew. And it's no surprise that my brother is an orthopedic surgeon and my sister's a psychiatrist, and I didn't apply myself the way that they did, and I didn't have those options in medicine, and I became a chiropractor. Not really the smartest thing, because I think I might be the world's worst chiropractor. And I knew even in my first few months of chiropractic school, that it wasn't the path for me. But, my father being my father, he'd say, Michael, you're in the school, get the degree. It'll always be there. You can fall back upon it. And it wasn't bad advice, I got to say. I ended up going through 4 years of school after college. And at that point, I had no real estate. My dad, no one in my family was a real estate person. I learned investing from my father, a very intelligent guy. But he was he was interested in stocks, mutual funds, index, dollar cost average, those types of strategies in the world. And so when I got out of chiropractic school, what he didn't tell me was I got married. I was just and I was sort of beholden, like golden handcuffs a little bit. This was the career. This is how I was going to make my money. And I got into it, and I just didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. No. I was not good at it. I told you I was terrible. But
I'm sure you're being humble, but you didn't like it.
No, I wasn't good at it. And I also could see the future of, chiropractic hours are typically people go to see their chiropractor after work oftentimes. So that means that the chiropractor themselves doesn't get home until 7, 8 o'clock every single night. And if you're going to have a family, you're missing dinner every night. And so I could see those types of things also from an actual lifestyle point of view, not working. And also you're doing the same thing every day.
Yeah.
That didn't appeal to me. So all of these things were kind of gelling for me, and I was dissatisfied with where I was, and I knew I needed to find something different. And what I was good at was the business side of it. I was good at the marketing and the operations and all the things that go into running clinics. And they were more than just chiropractic offices. They had medical doctors, they had physical therapy, they had all these one stop, for injuries. One clinic became 2, became 3, and within a few years, by the time I was 30 years old, I think I had 10 or 11 clinics by that point.
Wow, impressive.
And I was paying rent to all the landlords for each of those clinics.
Huh.
And then a book changed my life, actually. I was reading. I've always been a reader. I've always been interested in business books and things. And there was a book by Ray Kroc. You know who Ray Kroc is?
McDonald's.
McDonald's.
Yeah. Sure.
And it was called Grinding It Out. And I'm reading the book, and I've always been a fan of McDonald's as a customer, and, like the burgers, and know it's not the healthiest thing. But the book was not really about that. The book was about real estate. And I was blown away by what he was talking about. And then the movie came out years later called, I think it was called The Founder.
Yeah.
But that
great
book,
movie. Yeah.
Great movie.
Yeah.
And Michael Keaton was Ray Kroc in that. And it was actually in that they depicted a little differently than the book, but just it was the same. They were struggling actually under a big amount of debt, and they needed the idea that they were going to own the real estate. So if you own a share of McDonald's stock today, they are one of the largest commercial real estate owners in the world, excuse me. And of course, you're buying a hamburger company or hamburger and fry company or whatever, but you're also buying a real estate company.
Of course.
And I never rented another location after reading that book.
Wow.
Love it.
Love it.
That's what got me into real estate.
Incredible.
And so that opened my eyes to a new thing.
How did you go from renting to just now owning all these locations?
Well, it started with one.
Yep.
I bought a building here in Fort Lauderdale that I still own to this day. It's my first commercial property, and it was a restaurant. It was a very well located restaurant, and the day I bought it, I closed down the restaurant, and we went into renovations. And I enjoyed the construction aspect of it, so I knew there's a fun thing to. Chiropractic, the day-to-day aspect is you could adjust somebody and you really don't see the results too often like that. Mm-hmm. With construction, at the end of every day, the drywall gets hung, the thing gets painted.
You're seeing progress.
You see tangible.
You see it. Yeah. You can actually see it.
I enjoyed it, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
But at the end of that project, we had an office that I could be proud of and, put the company logo and whatnot. And it was doing quite well as a business. But I had a business partner, and I said to him, hey, I'm going to continue to do this. I like doing what I'm doing. You continue to run the day-to-day operations of these clinics that we had. Now we have one, owned office and 10 leased ones. Mm-hmm. And what we ended up doing was really every time that there was a chance a lease expired, I would not renew it. I would just find a building to replace it that I could own. And as you all know, buying a building is always easier when you're the occupant of it. Mm-hmm. In terms of financing, owner-user financing is always
SBA loans,
whatever it is. They're gonna the default rates are always lowest for those types of properties. So that ran its course. I think over the next couple of years, I bought maybe 5 or 6 buildings.
And you didn't buy them with the partner. It was just you that owned them?
At that time, so the first one I did, I bought without my partner. Then I bought a couple with him.
Got it.
And we were husband and wife, I call it, as a partnership. So he ran the day-to-day aspects of the healthcare clinics, and I was completely absent from that. But I shared in the revenue of that business, that healthcare company, which to this day is still existing 20 years later. And I did whatever I did for a number of years, where everything I did on the real estate side, he also received half of it. So it was a symbiotic thing.
Okay.
And what it did, actually, I haven't thought about this in a while, it allowed us to take the money that we earned in a ongoing active business, whatever that is for people, and then to plow it into things that were longer term and didn't have the immediate results like a business does, but real estate is a different kind of game. And it was sort of like a jab with a knockout punch, if that makes any sense.
It does. And I really think that I go to some of these investor club meetings and I meet really motivated. Typically, it's young people, people maybe in their 20s or 30s, and they're seeking knowledge and they're seeking how to get into the real estate game, and they have a job, a day job, and the day jobs, maybe they're barely making ends meet. I don't know, maybe they're making $65,000 a year or whatever it might be, and they're trying to find a way to get into real estate and they're hungry for it, but it's a challenge if you don't have enough income coming in to be able to qualify for the loans and have the down payments and have that, which is, there are ways around it, as we all know. You can find partners in it. You can find LPGP, seller financing, syndicating. There's all types of different creative ways and creative financing to do it. So it's not a, it's not a complete hindrance, but it's certainly a roadblock or at least a speed bump along the road. But when you set up a business like you set up, and you have 10 clinics, obviously you're making pretty good money on them. Yes, you're splitting it with a partner, but you have the cash flow to justify and probably qualified for loans very easily, I would assume.
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
Which is nice.
I have to go back to that. We didn't have issues with loans. We always, one of the lessons that I learned from my father-in-law, who was an attorney representing real estate people, as you do, was, and he was older. I was in my 30s, so he was probably in his 60s or 70s at that point, so at the end of his career. And he would say, in my career, I've seen people get burned by one thing mainly, and it's leverage. Over-leverage was the thing that killed people during bad times. And I took that to heart. And some lessons you have to learn yourself, and some you're able to hopefully, learn the easier way. And I never over-leveraged, even during the heyday moments of, because my career in real estate started around 2001. Okay. So in 2005 and 6, banks were offering me no money down, and I never took any of those deals. I always was that 20 to 30% down, borrowing 70%, and slept better at night. And I had a conservative dad, and obviously he thought I was an aggressive guy.
Okay.
But I still had, my
his
father.
voice there in the back of your
It's there today.
Okay, good.
It's there today. And he's been gone for years now. But no, it actually instilled a very good sense of, leverage kills,
Good.
Because things.
And I'm sure if you bought your first buildings just before the crash, the great crash in 07, 08, I'm sure that certainly helped to pad your, be a safety valve for you that you had, 30% equity or whatever it was before we had a 30 or 40% crash.
Well, I didn't start right before that. I had started 6 or 7 years prior to that crash. So when the crash came, I'm not sure what year you attribute the crash to being, maybe
06, 07, 08. I, started kind of end 06.
I agree.
More 07, 08.
So but I did buy my largest property right before the crash. I mean, literally, like April of 2007 is when we closed, and I think like the world really went off the cliff like in May.
How did you do there? Did you do okay when you bought it, at least?
Well, we talked about this offline. I bought it. There's an expression which I believe in very much. It's for anyone that's getting into real estate. You make your money the day you buy something, or you lose your money the day you buy something. It becomes a very tough road if you overpay or incorrectly pay for a property. So I bought it well, but if, let's say the property, I paid about $12 million for it, and I felt at the time the property was worth more, obviously. I thought I was buying, let's call it a $14 or $15 million asset for about 12, so I felt good about the purchase at that day.
That day, sure.
Within a very short amount of time, that purchase was below my $12 million in terms of in my, when I went mark to market.
Sure.
But had I bought it at 15, it would have been really far below. But obviously, during the years of maybe call it 8, 9, 10. I mean, I probably had an asset worth $9 or $10 million. But again, I didn't over leverage it, and I was able to, to do things.
What do you think you had LTV, a loan to value, 70-30 maybe, or
when I first purchased it?
When you first purchased it,
I can tell you exactly because I needed $3 million in cash, which at that time was a lot of money for me.
So 70.
So I put down I put down 3 on a $12 million purchase.
Or,
so it's
75.
a third, 20, 75%.
75. Okay, so you were right about break even after the crash. Let's say if it got down to a $9 million purchase price, you were right in the range, which just goes to show that even in one of the worst crashes in history, besides maybe the Great Depression, for real estate at least, you got in fairly well for the time.
I did. It was there were some moments that I didn't feel so great, and
of course,
when I don't typically syndicate any of the properties. The properties that I own without other people's money. But that deal, because I needed the $3 million for that deal, I didn't have it. So I went to family, not friends, his family, and so essentially I had their money alongside my money, and
yeah, that's scary.
And I'll be honest with you, I take better care of other people's things than I do my own. Like I would eat in my own car, but if I borrowed your car for the day, I would never go through the drive-through and eat in your car.
Same.
That's
Was your clinic the tenant for that property? Or
No, this was a big shopping center.
Okay.
This was so. I kind of got off track a little bit. I got into the real estate game through the mechanism that I told you on the healthcare. But within 2 years or so, I had run out, 3 years, I'd run out of clinics to buy. I wasn't really planning on expanding my clinical business. It had grown to a certain size that I didn't see any growth, or at least really my partner was the one running that business. He didn't see the growth, and therefore we weren't growing it. So what happened was at that point, I just became an investor into income property. Just the way that a lot of people do, similar to what you were talking about earlier, buying small duplexes, and then I went up the ladder to 4-plex and then an 8-plex. I bought a lower end mobile home park. These were all properties that had one thing in common. They were cash flow properties. And you're too young to know this. You might know this. There was a guy that would be on late night television. And this is when there was a lot less channels than there are today, and you didn't have the internet and all these things. But his name was Carlton Sheets. And he would go on and talking about real estate riches. And of course, he would sell you his CDs to give you, dating myself a little bit for however much money. But I bought the CDs. And I, listened to them. I read the workbooks. But the thing that I it's like you take a course, you get one thing out of it.
Sure.
There's something called the rule of 1%. You familiar with that?
The 1% rule. Yes.
Yeah. So I used the 1% rule, and that to this day,
I'll tell the audience what it is.
The rule of 1% is pretty straightforward. If you're buying a property for pick a number, $500,000, you have to bring in 1% per month, which in that situation, 10% is $50,000, so 1% is $5,000. In order to pay the amortized mortgage, not like a real mortgage, like where it's not IO and all the different engineering you can do to make your mortgage, but it'll pay a real mortgage and taxes and insurance. So that's about, let's call it par, using a golf analogy. So if you are looking at a property that's $500,000 and you're getting $6,000 a month in monthly rent, there's a pretty good chance you're going to make about $1,000 a month. Meaning $5,000 is what you need. The $1,000 above that, the sixth, is the profit. Versus if it's only bringing in $4,000, you're probably going to lose about $1,000 a month on that deal. Well, you could take that exact same 1% rule and grow it to a $10 million shopping center. You literally can buy a shopping center. I mean, you eventually have to take your pencil out and really start doing the math, but sure. I can get things off my desk very quickly. A broker will call me and ask me about whether I'm interested in something, and I can quickly ask him one or two questions and determine whether
What's
or
the
not.
net operating income? Okay, no thanks.
No,
not going to work. Yeah. We're at the 0.5%.
Now, he may say, hey, it's bringing in this much money and it's half lease, and here's the reason that it's.
Then you have value add.
Right. And that's the kind of discussion that I'm able to have and able to get rid of a lot of properties or a lot of potential properties. Anyway, so that was my my post-clinic early cash flow investor years of just buying these smaller properties that I realized were just going toward each of the properties that I was able to gain a little bit of profit on. So if I bought a small property and it made me $20,000 of positive cash flow. There was another book that I read, and this was written by Robert Kiyosaki, who I'm a big fan of. Not politically, but but his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And he had another one called Cash Flow Quadrant that were kind of linked together. What they did for me was provide me with something that I believe to this day. It's called Getting Out of the Rat Race. Right? Yeah. You ever read his book?
Yeah, both of them.
Rich Dad, Poor Dad I have not read.
The second one's really good.
Getting Out of the Rat Race was the key, again, takeaway from me of simply, which was just for the audience, let's figure out what you earn, what you need to spend, what you need to earn in order to live your life. I'm just making a number. Let's say it's 100. You need 100 grand to pay your mortgage, pay the car payment, pay for your kids' school, whatever it costs you. If you had $100,000 coming in passively, now if you go to work for it, that doesn't count. Got to remove that from the equation. But if you had $100,000 coming in passively, which is either income properties like we're talking about, or businesses that you invested in that you don't work in, then you're out of the rat race. That's like the game. So my kids are in private schools, so my number was above that. But the point being is that I would look at each income property that I purchased as getting closer and closer and closer to getting out of the rat race. And this was me in my, let's call it probably a little bit younger than you, 30 to 35, range. 30, in that ballpark range. And that's what I was doing, each one. But I will say, buying a lot of those properties, each one came with its own set of hurdles. And I found that later on that buying bigger properties actually was easier, not harder, because you're able to afford to bring professionals in to do a lot of the things.
Yes.
Let's unpack some of this. So my brain works a lot of times with timelines. I actually want to kind of go back to almost the very beginning because I think one of the fascinating things is building a business, and you kind of skip from saying, hey, I was a not great chiropractor to, oh my gosh, I have 10,
you made the
10
business part easy look easy.
You know, I think if you were in front of a chiropractor audience, you know, you'd be in the top 0.1% of number of chiropractic, you know, sort of practices that you had, or locations, or whatever businesses, whatever you call them. Give us a quick kind of 2-minute overview of how you scaled that, and how long did that take?
Quickly, I was working very hard at that time, and I was just, you know, I came out of school 26 years old. A lot of my friends had not gone to professional school and had started making money 4 or 5 years earlier than I did. And even when I graduated the first year, you're an intern, you're like, it's like slave labor, you know, you're being paid nothing. So I was 5 years, what I call behind, if that's, so there's a feeling that I had. And so I came out of the gates hot. I was hot. And I was just a working machine. I would get up before the clinic's hours were 9 to 1. I would get up at like 6 and be on the road marketing. And I would go to anything that could drive business to I had only one clinic, remember, at that time. This was year 1, month 1. And I didn't buy anything. I started a clinic. So I was just doing everything I could. I had a radio show, not that dissimilar than this. And I would go from my office, I would be able to remote broadcast into AM radio, because I couldn't afford FM anything, you know what I mean? And so I'd be on these stations that had mostly audiences that were either older, which had aches and pains, like see chiropractors, or cater to immigrants, or, you know, that didn't, and I would bring on a Spanish speaking person that would talk to them in their language and be able to, and so what happened was, once I became, what's the word, I guess trusted, I would be probably the best word, people would come to me for not just their chiropractic or medical reasons, but my cousin needs this, and I would be able to refer it to an attorney that did that, and
Awesome.
And I became sort of like a network within myself. And so by doing
It's like hub and spoke in a network, and you were the hub. You know, and then,
And so we would do, we ended up creating a show, an actual show where we had a Spanish-speaking guy. His name was David Bernstein, okay, whose daughter, Michelle Bernstein, is a very famous chef in Miami. Okay. But he was a Jewish fellow that also spoke Spanish because his wife was Spanish. And he would do the show on behalf of us that would sort of be, it was called Don David, like Don Corleone from like a sign of respect. He was an older man. And if you had any problem, you called Don David. And Don David would take the phone call. We'd take all the incoming calls, and we would parcel them out to different attorneys to help them, and different people to help them with whatever it is. Needed a mortgage, we'd go to a mortgage company and ask them to contribute to our budget. You know, so we were doing this advertising, and it was just bringing in all these people.
Awesome.
And then as a result of that, when you're sending people to whoever, they're sending them back, and it became this quid pro quo. Reciprocity.
Yeah.
You know, and even though it's a big world, it actually is a small world when you get into the business side of things. And, and, you know, when you're busy, I would say the term success begets success is true. And whatever we did it with, our company is called Integra. We did it with integrity. We hustle with integrity. So, you know, we're not going to cut corners, but we're going to work really hard. And I think that we're not, you know, I can't say I'm smarter than anyone, but I certainly have a work ethic that was instilled by my dad. My brother has it as well. And we just work, you know. And
that's great. And it's obviously you had a partner through all of this, and he contributed more on the operational side because you'd be bringing the business in. He would be running the operations, making sure the, you know, staff was, you know, hiring, firing, those types of things.
You know, we did. So I wasn't a partner with him initially. I actually was a solo guy the first year or year and a half. Mm-hmm. And our paths crossed, and when we went to dinner, and we had very similar situations. Actually, he was a chiropractor as well that had gotten out of it, and I was, and so we both were very similar. But I had different skills than he did. He was more operational, and I was more visionary and strategy and other things of that. And we meshed very well together. And it worked out great. We've been partners and friends for 30 odd years. Now, we're no longer partners since 2014.
Okay.
In anything, and just to kind of give you, when we got to our 40s after success, and we'll go back to that, we were successful enough that he didn't want to work that hard.
Okay.
And there's no rule that says you have to continue to grind forever. I was still in the grinding mode. I wanted more, not just more money. I had more mountains to climb, more things that interested me. And he was in a different mode at that time.
Got it.
And so when you're sharing everything and you're both working equally hard, it's perfect. But after a little while, maybe a year or two, where I could see that he wasn't, going at the same pace that I was, it became a little bit of an inequality. And we sat down as two friends, men, and we worked it out. And I said, listen, we're going to continue to own the things that we owned prior to today or whenever, as we have, and we've done that, except that I left the band and I became a solo artist, kind of like Sting leading the Police or something, And so I've had my solo career since 2014, about 10 years now, and everything I've done since 2014 has been just as a solo artist.
Got it. Okay. But you still share the partnership on the older assets and the ongoing businesses.
100%.
Yeah.
Everything that we had prior to 2014, we're full partners exactly the same way we were.
Amazing.
That's great.
And how quick did you scale up to those 10 locations?
Well, actually, I kind of glossed over it. So what happened was I think when I met him, I had 3. Okay. I met him, he had 3. So we became 6 the minute we became partners. And then we added 4 or 5 more as partners. So that's how I got from 3 to 11 or 12 that quickly.
Okay. Easier to scale when you have synergies and you're able to.
For sure.
Yeah.
He also had, this goes back to the reasons that I partnered with him, besides having skill sets that were different than mine. He also I was concerned at that time, this is a chiropractic conversation or a medical conversation. There's, in this state of Florida, you probably see all the billboards for, injury attorneys. Sure. 411 pain is the biggest out there, but there's, whatever, so many, it's not even funny. But they were talking about getting rid of personal injury protection, which is a very big part of any medical provider's income. Obviously, all these lawyers and all these doctors are going to that, and so this partner had clinics outside of the state of Florida, and I liked the idea of partnering with him because it got me exposure.
Diversity.
If all of your eggs are in the Florida basket and they change that law
overnight, you
literally could be without a business.
Yeah.
And by having the exposure elsewhere, it gave me strategically peace of mind that law change or no law change, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
Is that the primary reason you made the decision to do that? Because I'm guessing if you had 3 locations, you couldn't be at every location. So you had people working for you at the time, chiropractors working for you.
After 18 months of being in practice, I never saw another patient. So I was never in any of those 3 locations. I was never the treating doctor.
Got it.
You know what I mean? I was out of the day-to-day actual practice from the first location. I hired a guy, and that's what allowed me to see in my first location, I got so busy I couldn't see patients. That's what happened.
Yeah.
I got so busy running the business that then I brought in some younger guy. I was like 29, so he was 27, and I'm like, hey, do me a favor, you see the patients.
But that's a sign of success, and you're doing something right.
One of the, like you mentioned, cash flow quadrants, right? And there's the 4 quadrants, right? And there's the small business owner, there's the big business owner, and you transitioned pretty quickly into that big business owner by removing yourself.
So in the book, very good, by the way. So that was the second thing that I took away, besides the getting out of the rat race aspect from Robert Kiyosaki's book. The second thing was this quadrant that he had designed, which he made a whole other book of. And it had, if you can picture it, the plus sign. Top left-hand corner is a letter E, which stands for an employee. And it's tough to get ahead when you're the employee, really, unless you're the center fielder for the New York Yankees employee.
Exactly.
Back to my original comment of people trying to get into real estate and they're making $65,000 a year. I mean, it's a challenge.
It is a challenge.
It's a challenge.
You know, there are ways, but you've got to be more creative in those early things, and you've got to bring in other people. I think in terms of getting the money is the hardest thing typically.
But
actually, I would say
eventually you get out of that E. That's like, even if you're in the E phase, you're working to get out of it no matter what. Like,
there's almost no
yeah.
government tax benefits to being an E. You get taxed at the highest amount, then you have to spend all the dollars after taxes. Whereas if you're in an S, which is the next below the E on the plus sign, and the government wants you to be an S. They want you to have small businesses. In aggregate, small business owners have way more employees than even the largest companies of our country. I mean, I'm talking in 2s and 3s and 4s.
Sure.
Yep. And so being an S is better than being an E. But being an S, which is a small business owner, means you got to go to work every day. You're there, and the money that you earn is derived from you being there. Mm-hmm. It limits you to some extent because you got to be there.
Sure.
And then what he was saying is making that shift from S to B, and B is simply the difference between a small business owner and a big business owner. And a big business owner is able to work on their business, not in the business. That was the transition. And I definitely have somewhere in my notes from 2001, or it was S to B. That was a very big thing for me.
That's a big thing for me right now. You guys have done it well. Jerron's done it pretty well. It's just that's the transition is sometimes it's hard.
You've done it in such a quick time frame. You've been a realtor how long now?
So I've had my license since 2010, but I've been
but active
since January 2019.
That's amazing. So 5 years, and you have how many people on your team now?
We have about 13-ish people.
It's amazing.
Staff.
I did 110 or so transactions last year. It's awesome.
But most of
you've transitioned to Big B. I don't know the exact time. But
I don't know if I'd define it as
He's
Big
large,
B.
small B, in my opinion, is probably how I would define it.
Most people work in order to do that 110. That's all me doing that, or most of that, right? So I haven't, like, you had a doctor that filled your previous role. I haven't had another broker that's been able to fill, or realtor that's been able to fill the role, so I can continue to work. I'm still servicing those clients.
If you went away for 6 months, your production would be completely different.
Yeah.
And that's almost the way to distinguish or to judge whether or not you've been able to transition well.
Exactly.
But that should be your, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but that should, that would be the evolution of it. You grow your S to a certain size, and then you see that you can only go so far.
Yep.
And frankly, your personal life, your lifestyle will dictate some things as you start to have families, as you get older and don't have the energy you might have had in your younger days. You start to say, wow, I need to come up with some strategies to plan for the future, so I can take some time off.
Yeah.
There is one other quadrant that we didn't mention, which is the bottom right-hand corner, which is an I, which you can and should do from any of those other three. The E, the S, and the B are all able to be an I. And an I is simply an investor. And an investor is simply someone that knows and understands investments, so they're constantly reading and up to date with what's going on in the world, whether it be stocks, bonds, in this day and age, cryptocurrencies, things of that nature, and just understanding business, which is a lifelong pursuit, really. Yeah. And to some extent, I think so. At the end of the day, you want to be on the right-hand side of that quadrant, which is a B and an I, and that's really the goal.
And I think some people think it just what you said there. It has to be all or nothing. So someone has to go directly from employee to investor full time, but it doesn't have to be. Can it be that? It could be. It's a difficult lift to go if you don't have capital to go directly into a full time investor. We've seen some wholesalers. We had Jose on here recently and Tito, who are great wholesalers and flippers, and they made that transition from fireman, and he was an engineer, I believe.
Exactly.
And I would say that's one example, and they're successful, and they're doing good volume. In fact, I'm doing a couple deals with them. But
so their wholesaling business, while it's right next to their investing business, because it's like almost one and the same thing, they're generating cash from the wholesaling business, so that is their business. That's their S quadrant.
It's kind of a hybrid possibly.
And then they're taking the deals that make sense to invest in.
It depends on the deal. You're right. Right. To create long-term passive investment. So you're right.
But you need to generate cash. That goes back to even their model is like, we got to make money somehow to go ahead and do deals. Yeah. Whereas a lot of people think the I quadrant is, I'll make the money in the I quadrant. I'll generate the cash, which is very, very hard to do without having cash up front.
I think, again, I'm speaking Robert Kiyosaki's words, which I happen to agree with, is that the I is actually can and should be done from all three of those things. But if you're an employee, you should be learning about business and learning about investments. If you're a small business owner, you should be learning about investments. And if you're a big business owner, obviously you probably already do know it, but at the same time, continually learning. You don't just get it in a day. It's a constant evolution. You might study something for a long time and then get this idea, a year down the road that, this is how I should do it.
Yeah, makes sense. So circling back, you bought several clinics. Then you mentioned that you had a mobile home park. That's very interesting. Was that your first investment and foray outside of the chiropractor office space, or?
No, what happened with me was I was in the chiropractic mode, or let's call it health clinic, because it was really more than medical clinic, whatever the word. But I was in that mode, and I went to go buy a clinic from an older retiring doctor. I wanted to buy his building. I wanted to buy his practice. It was up in an area called Port St. Lucie. This is 2002, 2003, I forgot exactly when it was, but this area was growing like mad. And at that time, prior to the crash, areas like Port St. Lucie were just going like gangbusters.
Sure.
And then, of course, when the crash came, it hit a big speed bump. But it brought me up there, and this is before the days of having an iPhone and a map on your phone and all. This was back to the old days of pulling
MapQuest, or you're printing on MapQuest on your printer, or whatever it is.
Exactly. And so I ended up going there, and we didn't strike a deal, but it got me up there, got me up into that world. Mm-hmm. And while I was there, I just had the day off. I worked for myself. I just decided to start kind of looking around, and I went to an area called, this is Treasure Coast. This is about an hour or so, a little further than an hour north of where we are right now. Mm-hmm. And I ended up I was in Port St. Lucie. I went to a place called Fort Pierce, which is a little bit right near it, a little bit north.
St. Lucie County.
And then I went a little bit north of that to Vero Beach. And when I got to Vero, I really liked it. It was just had a lot of things that I'd been there once before as a kid, so I kind of had one thing. But I ended up just going to meet a broker. He was a very intelligent guy, older man, Harvard trained, and I taught him Carlton Sheets 1%. I swear to God I did. I said to him,
"Give me your CDs." Yeah.
No, I just explained the thing to him. He picked it up in 2 seconds.
Sure,
it's a very easy concept.
Yeah, of course.
And I said, Ron, do me a favor. If you see anything, and this guy's a broker, he's out there hustling, trying to sell deals, and I'm a fairly successful young guy. You find me properties that meet the 1% rule, and a week later, hey, Michael, I got an 8-plex. And I bought it. Nice. Because it met the 1% rule.
Awesome.
I paid $400,000 for it, and each unit brought in, if you think about 8 units, you have to bring in $500 a month per unit to bring in $4,000 a month, and it was bringing in $500. So, it was that.
That's great.
Next, Michael, I got a mobile home park. Oh yeah, tell me about it, and there's 13 units, and you own 10 of them, and the people own 3 of them. Like, they just pay for what's called the ground.
And what is that? What's that? A ballpark?
So when you buy a mobile home park.
A mobile home park. Sorry.
A mobile home park. So this thing, but there was 13, and this is a low-end mobile home park.
Okay.
I paid $250,000 for this thing.
Okay. Awesome.
This is 32-year-old Michael.
Okay. With financing or without?
No, so I put down $50,000.
Okay.
And I borrowed $200,000.
Okay, amazing.
I
didn't know what financing is like on mobile home parks.
So, I got $200,000 money. Well, interesting thing happened. I bought it in January 2004. And then 8 months later, if you guys were living in the state of Florida, 4 hurricanes hit our state that year, 2 of which dropped down right in Vero Beach.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
And we had enough damage, but it was like damage, but it wasn't damage. I mean, these things are bad mobile homes to begin with. So like, it wasn't like they were like pristine and now they were damaged. They were damaged and then they were more damaged, but we got a claim. And the insurance company gave us $50,000. So within like 8 or 9 months of buying the thing, I had all my capital back in my pocket. And the loan was obviously still out there, $200,000, but that's being serviced by the people paying the rent. It wasn't my money, essentially. Yeah. They're the one paying the mortgage. So that was pound for pound, maybe my best deal, actually.
If you're just doing numbers, that's funny.
But what's interesting about it was...
Do you still own it?
I do.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
I do. And again, I only own it because I learned something, and you asked me in preparation for today. Yeah. These are one of the many lessons I learned in real estate or in my life. So we owned this mobile home park. It's got 13 homes, 3 of which are owned by the people. the owners of the home, and they just paid the dirt. Let's call it, they paid $300 a month to rent the dirt, whereas the other people, the other 10, would pay us $450 a month for the dirt and the home. So essentially $300 and $150 if you want to divide it up. Those 10 people there was always a problem with the mobile home. There was always an issue. There was a leak. There was a this. They would destroy them, from time to time. The other 3 that owned, we never heard from, because if there's a leak, it's their leak.
Yes.
If they never destroyed because it's their home. So after a few years of figuring that out, I sold all 10 of those things.
Great.
To the tenants, yeah.
Which are mostly
like rent to own or whatever.
Yeah. And now all 13 are owned by them. They're all maintained much better than they would otherwise be.
It's all psychology, yeah.
And it's their home.
Yeah.
They're first generation, immigrants, oftentimes lower income people. This is their home. And it's been an actually easy, it's very simple. Literally 13, checks come in on because they don't want to lose their home.
Sure.
And there's never any maintenance. Now we maintain the road and things of that nature. But other than that, it's a very simple, and I paid long since, bought it in 2004. It's 20 years later. The mortgage has been paid off, and they're paying approximately, I'd be guessing a little bit, but it's just, $450 a month. So times 13, $5,000 or $6,000 a month gross. So $70-something thousand a year total, minus some taxes. So it's a $50,000 a year income stream back to getting out of the rat race.
That's a nice chunk of the way there.
That's $50,000 that I don't have to do anything for, and I could be in Tahiti, and that money is coming in.
Yeah.
And that's just one of many that I have.
And you have a property manager for that?
I do. Again, this goes back to having a lot of properties. Once you get to a certain amount of properties, you're able to afford a guy.
Yeah.
And that guy works for me all day, every day, and he's...
And he'll manage all the different asset classes. Yeah. So he'll take care of the mobile homes and
there's not much to take care of on that. But
I would think so. But yes. Okay. Oh, that's great. So you did the mobile home park. You did some multifamily, and as you're buying these, were any of them ever intended for a flip, or did you ever flip them quickly in under 2-3 years?
I'm not a seller.
You're not a seller. You're a buyer.
I'm a holder. I have sold in my life maybe 2 properties, 3 maybe.
Yeah.
But I own 40 something. So you're talking about, I buy with the intention of holding.
That's amazing. And then what other asset classes did you get into and when?
So really, that 5-year period between the clinical only business and just the smaller properties was a period of my life. But once in 2005, so a little bit more than a year after that mobile home park type thing, I had an opportunity to buy a shopping center that was completely out of my price range at that point. I paid $6 million for something. Now, at that point, I think I had bought something. This is almost 20 years ago. So $1 million today is not what $1 million was then. But
it's probably 12, 15 million in today's numbers or whatever it is.
But all I know is that $6 million was a number that was incomprehensible to me. Yeah. It was a shopping center in Vero Beach, that same broker that I told you about that I taught the rule of 1%. He brought me this deal. It was a really damaged hurricane damaged center. But, I'm a value guy. So ultimately I looked at it going, it's 17 acres on US 1. It's 160,000 square feet of retail. And you start doing the math, you're like, that's like $35 a square foot. You can't build anything for under 100. And this is 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I'm buying this thing for $6 million, and it wasn't for sale like that. It was they had a bidding process. Mm-hmm. So we didn't know what to bid. You know what I mean? I didn't know what to put on the piece of paper. I wanted it obviously, but I didn't know what the other people were bidding. But we did bid $6 million, and we won it.
Wow.
Meaning that people were so short-sighted that $6 million won it.
Incredible.
And I got an offer from Woolbright, a very well-known local company here that owns many great shopping centers just around where we are right now, for $9 million the day I bought it.
No way. They weren't a part of the bidding process?
They didn't catch it, no. They caught it after we were under contract.
So you could have flipped that
for $3 million.
For $3 million in one day.
This is me at 35. Could have made $3 million.
Which at that time is life-changing money,
Yeah. Life-changing money.
Yeah.
But the other side of it happened where
you had a lot of foresight that it's going to be worth way more than that, right?
I just felt that, yeah. I did. I didn't know what exactly.
You didn't know what to be.
I didn't know what, but I didn't want to sell what I just bought like a day earlier.
Totally,
you know what
I
I mean?
agree. I wouldn't have done it either.
Yeah.
Keeping in mind that, you start taking away capital gains taxes and,
That $3 million goes away quick.
it goes away real quick.
Yeah.
Sure.
Now, what was interesting is, remember, I didn't have that much dough at that time. And so ultimately, with $6 million purchase, I had no track record in big time retail shopping centers. So every bank I went to said no. Now I had a successful healthcare company and I had a small but growing portfolio of small income properties. But running a big retail center is not for the faint of heart. And banks, for the most part, did not lend to me.
Especially with a big value add component. You had
Correct.
an execution piece that they maybe didn't believe that you could do because maybe
exactly
you didn't
right.
do one like that before.
So I found a bank. One bank said yes to me, and TransCapital Bank, and I got it. It was a smaller bank. The CEO reached over the desk and he sized me up. He asked me a couple questions, and we talked for about 20 minutes after that. And next thing you know, he literally just said, loan,
Amazing.
Now I had to put $2 million down, which was a lot of money, you know what I mean, and borrow the $4 million. And actually, I remember this. I had to put the $2 million down before I had the loan set up. So I put the $2 million down. If I didn't get that loan from TransCapital Bank, I risked losing that $2 million, which was, a big chunk of me at that time. Yeah. So that $4 million.
That takes cojones. Yeah.
It did.
Yeah. And then how much did you need for the value add and the rehab?
$4 million. $4 million.
This right here
On top of the two?
Yeah, well, but again, I got some financing on that. So I think I once I started getting, I missed a huge thing. So what happened was the shopping center had an old Kmart, which Kmart was sliding
On the way down. Mm-hmm.
And they were locked in that when they signed the lease for the Kmart, they had been the biggest retailer on the planet back in those days. Late 70s, they were the biggest retailer. They were the Walmart of that era. Mm-hmm. So they come to little old Vero Beach. They sign this sweetheart, deal at $2 and change a square foot with no increases for 75 years.
Oh my God.
They're still paying that to this day, by the way.
Oh my God.
In any event, but where the value was the rest of the shopping center, where there was a Publix. Now the Publix left and moved down the street, so now there's an empty Publix. Fortunately for the hurricane knocked the U.S. Postal Service's distribution facility out of commission, and they needed a place to sort the mail. And so they rented temporarily the old Publix that was empty in the shopping center that I was buying. And I was able to secure them for a 20-year lease to stay in that location. And that changed. Once I had the U.S. government signed to a 20-year lease paying real money, the money for the loan on the rehab came in.
Ooh.
You follow me there?
Pretty quick, though. Got it. You got that lease fairly quick?
Within a year. That first year was me living in Vero Beach. I actually bought a home up there so I could be there a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So you really hands-on this.
Oh, I'm hands-on. Okay. Yeah, I'm a hands-on guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, very hands-on.
This is just proof that, in hindsight, people look at this and they're like, "Oh my God, he had a $3 million offer the day after, he closed on this." But the reality is you risked $2 million.
I did.
You had a huge lift on the value add side. There was just so much to do.
The center now, to this day, right now, 24 million maybe, if I had to put it mark to market.
Holy smokes!
Amazing.
How much was the rehab?
4 million.
Okay.
But it is a cash flowing machine. I mean, so, the valuation of a center, and this goes back to, my net worth, this is the truth for a lot of real estate people. So yeah, you take the $24 million current valuation, subtract the, the debt against it, and that's your equity net and your net on it. But the reality is cash flow is king for me. You know what I mean? Ultimately, I don't use that number. I mean, yeah, it looks good on my balance sheet and all that, but what I do care about is that thing flows cash every month that I'm able to use to live my life, to invest in other deals. That has been the more important aspect of it.
And yeah, awesome. I know, just to drop this for the audience here, and you told me I could disclose this, but at this point you own over 1 million square feet of retail space, correct? Mm-hmm. And then your assets themselves are worth over $100 million.
That's right.
In combination, in aggregate. So you put that together, and we'll get to the further stories of different assets you put together. But just back to this deal, though, do you still have does Kmart still have the lease and they're subletting the property at $2 a square foot, or how does that work?
So it's $276 a foot, and what happened with them is Kmart, if you know the story, Kmart and Sears were merged together by Edward Lampert, who's a very bright hedge fund, very wealthy man. And he didn't know how to run a retail company very well. And so Kmart, Sears combined went into bankruptcy a few years ago. He's smarter than anyone. He took them out of bankruptcy and was able to shed all the assets that he didn't want. And he emerged as a new company, and it's called Transformco. And they are an amazing real estate company now. Because Kmart and Sears, back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, when they were the strongest retailer, they have incredible locations. If you know Fort Lauderdale, let's use Fort Lauderdale as an example, Searstown, on the corner of Sunrise Boulevard and Federal Highway. They had that old Searstown right there. Well, that is a Transformco asset that they flipped to Jared Kushner's company for $100 million. So what they're doing is the assets that they emerged from bankruptcy with, they're curating them. They're saying, this one we're going to sell to Aimco for $100 million. This one we're going to turn into self-storage because that's what that area. This one we're going to demolish and put in multifamily here. With my asset, the reason that they kept the asset out of bankruptcy is because their lease was so good that they can arbitrage the $276 they're paying me and rent it out to Tractor Supply, which is what they did, for $13 a foot, and they make $10 a foot. But what happened was they needed something from me. And I took my pound of flesh.
You were waiting, just waiting for something.
I did. So what they did was
what do they need?
They needed a couple of things. And in essence, Tractor Supply, if you've ever been to one, they have these area on the side where they sell all the things that not tractors, but riding mowers and different things that you tow. Anyway, they couldn't do that without my permission. And there's a few other things. I said, look, I'm happy to have Tractor. I'm the one that sent them Tractor Supply, first of all, because Tractor Supply was interested. And I said, hey, Transformco, we've got a live one here. And so ultimately they needed it. And I said, look, guys, $276 is ridiculous. It should be higher. And I negotiated a higher rent for the Kmart is about 90,000 total feet. Tractor Supply took a third, so about 30,000. And right now, 2/3 is still sitting there empty. So they're paying $276 on the 2/3 that is empty. They're paying $776, a $5 increase on the 1/3 that is occupied. As the other two spaces fill in with rent-paying future tenants, they will all go to the $776.
Amazing. How long have those been sitting vacant, the other two spots?
Oh, years.
Really?
Years.
They just can't fill them, huh?
Oh, no. They just went through bankruptcy within 2 years ago. Yeah. So their bankruptcy took years, and it's been
they have other assets to focus more on.
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Okay.
And Kmart Vero is coming into its own.
Yes.
Each year it continues to get more and more plausible to see these larger retailers come into the market. So.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's been a great thing. It turned out to be a great thing, and it there's a lot going on with that property. So that center alone is about 175,000 of my 1,000,000 square feet. That's 175 right there.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
A significant chunk.
It's a chunk.
And other than the empty space, which you're still getting rent on, because
I'm getting 276 on 2/3
on those.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I won't call that vacant, but is there any other vacant spots?
I have one 1,400 square foot space. We're 99% full.
99. Awesome.
Yeah.
Really good. How long did it take you to stabilize from when you purchased the asset to when you were more or less fully leased?
I bought it in 2005. Really, literally the 99% occupancy is a new phenomenon. I've always had vacancy. Okay. It takes a long time, not just leased, but each of these centers were downtrodden. They had been, each space requires it to be redone. So you're redoing each space. If you went into the place that is where they do facials, it's called M2 Aesthetics. You walk in there, it's got modern look to it. And, each space requires not just, you need to find the right tenant.
Sure.
You need to do the renovations. And so it's taken 20 years really to get to where it is. I bought it in 2005. And although it's been a successful center for many years already, it hasn't hit the level of where it is today until just recently.
Okay. And for the build outs, let's say the nail salon wants to come in, they're negotiating with you. What's the most common way to fund those build outs? Is it you funding it and then giving some kind of, or they fund it and you give them a credit, or do you do it and then They pay you back over time, or how does that work?
There's so many
Or it's
different
just an
ways.
incentive?
There's totally different ways to do it. But what I've learned, back to lessons I've learned. So I did a build out for a salon tenant. I made it perfect for her. She was a Paul Mitchell trained person. She was going to bring Paul Mitchell into her, and it was a brand that I was excited about. So I went ahead and did the entire build out. Well, she moved in there, and within like 8 or 9 months, she was just a painful tenant to deal with.
Jeez.
And she left me high and dry. She moved out because she didn't invest a penny into that space.
Yeah. Back to the psychology we talk about with the mobile homes too. If they don't have some
Skin in the
ownership
game.
interest, not literal ownership, but some kind of buy-in.
Yeah.
They
Now,
don't treat it.
On the good
like their
side, the place was
yeah.
beautifully built out by me, and I was able to eventually, re-tenant it with a tenant that was a higher quality person that appreciated what I built there. But I wouldn't do that again. I would almost never do a build out where I'm going ahead and putting all the dollars in.
Got it.
I want
so give me an example of something maybe you've done in the last few years. What does that negotiation look like, and where does it end up?
I love doing, like, I have a Club Pilates that's going in there right now where I can do a couple of them. A Club Pilates, a hibachi place that's a Japanese hibachi, where I just said, hey, you do the entire build out, we'll give you free rent. And so ultimately they're investing all their time, effort, and money into the space. And then which keep in mind, the space was empty anyway, getting nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I just get a little
perceived
bit
value.
Perceived value, yeah. I get a little bit more nothing for a little longer. Oftentimes, if I do any kind of a tenant improvement credit, I'll do it at the end. So let's say that the build out is expected to be making a number up 100,000, and we're going to contribute 30 or 40 of it. I will not give that 30 or 40 until the CO. So they're putting out their money, and then the minute they hand me the CO, I give them the $40,000. It incentivizes them to get through the project quickly, and
and many times you'll literally write them a check, or you then just give them the rent credit starting at the CO point.
Sometimes I'll give them an option. Some people would rather have the money.
Got it. Okay. Yep.
But to be honest with you, I've also keep in mind that I'm a tenant. Even in some of the clinics, I didn't convert all on the healthcare side. The 20-something-year-old healthcare business, we to this day still lease a couple of the locations that we never could find a alternate, better location to buy. Yeah. So I'm a tenant. I'm also, we haven't gotten into bowling yet, but I'm also a tenant in that business where I pay real rent. So I go at negotiations from the standpoint of, I want these tenants to be successful. Their success is our success. We're a real estate company. If they go in business and out of business, that doesn't help me. Yeah. So if I can help them, get through, opening a business is very expensive. Getting great signage is expensive, but the signage and the various things that make a place look a certain way, really a top quality looking salon or whatever it might be, it's in my best interest to further their business.
You're partnered in their success.
We are
you really are.
We are.
You're not on paper, but you are.
We are, and we look at it like that. And by the way, that has been one of the crutches of my success is that the tenants feel that we are not this adversarial landlord-tenant, and we are in business with them. We want them, and keeping in mind in retail, unlike in multifamily residential, where you might have a tenant for a couple of years at most, but they might be there but a lot of tenants move in for one and out. Most of our tenants are there for, multi-years, and some 10, 15, 20 years, like the post office, for instance.
Yeah, for sure. So let's get to the the bowling story. I like this one. But, unless there's another story in between for buying assets. So, yeah.
No, because what happened with the first deal I told you about was 2005. That the hurricanes were 2004. I bought the damage center in 2005. For that $6 million going into a project. I'm living there a lot now. I have a home there, and I'm there all the time. The center directly next door comes on the market. No, not at $6 million, at the $12 million mark. This is 2007 now. This is 2 years after the first one, and right before the major recession. And I buy another shopping center that's similar size. So now I've got 175,000 feet here and 175 next to it. So I've got 350,000 feet of retail, all on US 1 in Vero, 35 acres on US 1. A big deal,
Okay.
But, and I needed to borrow money because I didn't have, after spending the $2 million on the first center, 2 years later, I needed $3 million. I didn't have it. So I called my older brother, who's a successful orthopedic surgeon, who's grinding every day doing surgeries, and he's looking to copy his younger brother and some of the passive income.
Great.
And he was able to contribute, and my mother-in-law did some, and
creating win-wins. Yeah,
we did.
Good.
But
so
after
you purchased it. Yep.
I bought it.
Yep.
And it had an empty movie theater. 40,000 of its feet were empty movie theater, and I got lucky. I got lucky that a local Vero Beach man, a successful man who had a chain of automotive dealers. His name was Rick Starr, quality guy. I had Rick Starr Acura, Rick Starr Lincoln Mercury. He saw the writing on the wall in his business, sold to AutoNation for a pretty penny. And I don't know why he got into the movie business, but he did. And he had at that time 2 or maybe 3 movie theaters, one in Melbourne, a little further up the road, another one in Rhode Island, don't ask me what. And he had his eyes on this. He lived in Vero. He lives in Vero. He wanted to redo the old movie theater. So I was very blessed to get this guy interested in my empty movie theater. Because literally when I bought it, there was homeless people living inside the theater.
Wow.
It was terrible. And it was an old theater. And this goes back to deal making. I said, Rick, he needed me as a landlord. He needed a new roof, and a roof on 40,000 feet it's a number, I don't know what a new roof would be back then, but $600,000 for a new roof on that size square footage. It needed this, it needed that. And the landlord is responsible for these things. These are normal landlord things. And I just didn't have the dough. And I said to him, is there a way that we could work out? He had plenty of money. So I think I did the roof and maybe one other thing, and he did all the other things at his expense, but he got a rent credit.
Okay.
And that's how we were able to bridge the gap.
Yeah, great.
So he did a multi-million-dollar renovation. He called the theater the Majestic Theater, and there was a great Jim Carrey movie called The Majestic.
The Majestic, yeah.
And the theater is first class. It's got granite countertops, and the attendees are all wearing bow ties. It's like a throwback kind of theater, cool. But with all the new technology. So it opened to amazing success. And I was just super fortunate. Now, he's not paying huge rent because he's not a dumb man. He negotiated himself a nice lease. But keep in mind, when I bought the center, it was getting 0. You know what I mean? So having this new rent-paying, beautiful tenant, everyone in town knows it. I changed the shopping center's name to be called the Majestic Plaza to take some momentum from him.
And I don't know a whole lot about retail, but that's one of your anchor tenants, right? And that's bringing in traffic to the center and
for sure
cross-pollinating in different businesses, right?
It is the largest tenant in there. The second largest tenant, though, was a bowling alley owned by, coincidentally, an orthopedic surgeon who owned multiple bowling alleys, all of if you were classifying them in terms of A, B, C, D, F. They were F quality bowling alleys.
You had to bring your own ball and pins.
You mean you would never do like a kid's birthday party there? But
you'd have walked out and go get your ball after you toss it.
It was gross. I mean, it was gross. Now, who went there? True. Look, you're in a small town like Vero. Yeah, true bowlers. If you want to go bowling, that was the only game in town.
Got it. Yeah.
And you went there. But I, rang this man up and I said, I won't use his name. I'll be nice to him.
Use his first name. There you go.
I showed this doctor, this owner of the bowling alley, what we had done with the Majestic Theater. And I said, look, let's sit down. And I was hoping we could sort of have a similar meeting to the one that I have with this gentleman, Rick Starr, and be able to come up with a solution of how we could take his F quality and raise it to a B. I was looking for a Taj Mahal. I just wanted something, I could be proud of. And we just couldn't be any further from agreeing. If I said black, he said white, and it ended ugly.
Okay. Wow.
It ended ugly.
Wow. Yeah.
And I remember, and now we're in 2009. We're in the heart of the recession. Yeah. Other tenants are leaving my shopping center because they're going out of business. And this guy decides to, at the end of his lease, and we're fighting now. He took his stuff and left. Picked up all his crappy bowling alleys and left. And I went to Mr. Starr and I said, Mr. Starr, I know you're not a bowling alley operator, but you're an amazing man, and you're obviously very talented in the hospitality business with the movie theater. It's not that different. Would you be willing to consider, taking, a shot at this? And he, let me look at it. And like a month or two later, he came into my office in Vero, and he had like a pile of papers flopped on my desk. And he goes, all right, I've done all the legwork on this thing. It's going to cost me $4 million to do this. And by the time I'm done doing that and paying you rent, the profits that I would expect to get, I'm going to get less money than I'd get putting a bond and, getting a bond for that money and sitting on the beach. So have at it, kid.
Enjoy. Wow.
And I had no other options. Nobody wanted to open a bowling alley. No one had the $4 million, first of all. You need to find the 1 in a million person that has $4 million that wants to open a bowling alley in Vero Beach. It's like impossible.
Yeah.
But I needed it because I had an empty space. And
it would have been too expensive to rehab it to something else?
Remember, when he left with his bowling, it's a cavernous thing. You walk into 35,000 empty feet.
Yeah.
It's big.
It needs to be a bowling alley, yeah.
And it's got one electrical meter for the whole. You can do in construction, you can do anything. Just how much money to put in firewalls. Each firewall is a fortune, and air conditioning. Now, so I ended up doing something, and probably one of the most proud things I've ever done is I created a bowling alley with $2 million. I was able to find a bowling alley going out of business in Memphis, Tennessee, selling its old equipment, the bowling equipment. They're called pin setters that put the pins down after you bowl. They pick them up and put them down. And they were making way for a Walmart in Memphis. I was able to buy them. It cost me more to ship them, and they're big. Each one's like a car. And it cost me more. I had a caravan of these 18-wheelers bringing them home, bringing them back to Vero. And it cost me more to ship them back than it did to buy them. And then I found, so that was all the equipment, all the lane stuff. But the thing that's behind, people don't see that. So it didn't matter that they were old. It's sort of like an old car. If you have a good mechanic, you can keep an old car running well forever. But the front of the house stuff, the things that the customer touches, and if you built a new bowling alley with all old stuff, that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And I was able to find a place in Atlanta, Georgia that was gone out of business. I was able to buy it, not for nothing, but for a fraction of what the Brunswick would have charged me. And we were able to build this $4 million project for about $2 million. Wow. And when we opened it up, it's been a huge success. And so not only is it a very successful thing for my partner and I, we're still partners on it, like I told you.
Great.
But it pays $40,000 a month in rent every month. Every month that thing, not only does it profit my partner and I from, but also sends the center, which I'm also the owner of.
So double profit. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's been a huge thing. And you may not know this, but liquor licenses here in Florida are expensive. And what they, depending on which county you live in, they're different prices. So in Miami, for instance, it's called a 4 COP, which is, you can do a beer and wine license for $1,000, nothing. But a real liquor license was, depending where you are, $500,000 some places, $400,000 others, depending where you are. When you have a restaurant that has a certain amount of square footage and sells 51% of their sales are food-based and has a certain amount of seats, you get an exemption. It's called a restaurant exemption, and you get a liquor license. So you go to Outback right now, they're pouring you liquor on a liquor license that was free because they have an exemption. You go to a hotel, certain number of rooms, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, there's a hotel exemption. So if you go to a hotel and there's a bar downstairs, they didn't pay the $500,000. They have a hotel exemption. Well, guess what? There's a bowling exemption.
Really? Oh, cool.
And if you have 12 lanes or more in the state of Florida, you get a liquor license.
Oh, wow.
So you would never open a bowling alley with 10 lanes. You'd always find room for 12. Yeah. But what happens is that, so now I have a bowling alley with 32 lanes, obviously way more. I've got a liquor license. We're pouring liquor, which is one of our profit centers. The space next door is empty. So I blow through the wall and I expand it. As long as it's under the same roof, my liquor license attaches. So we now have a billiard club called Sticks right next to the bowling alley. Cool. And that bowling alley feeds the liquor licenses, meaning when you're getting a drink at Sticks Billiard Club, it has different entrance and all that. You wouldn't even know it was owned by the same company. It's being poured under the liquor license. So that has actually filled in more square footage. So that bowling alley now has 40,000, almost the same amount of square footage as the movie theater, because between the Sticks and the bowling alley and whatever else, it's all one big thing.
Great. That's incredible value add.
It's
idea.
a good combination too. Movie theater, bowling alley, billiards.
Well, now you're going to the bigger picture. So
Yeah.
if you imagine that, now you've got a couple of restaurants in the center. So now we're positioning ourselves as the place to come on a Friday night. In a small town, you can go bowling at a very nice place now with big screens. You can watch the fight there, whether it's UFC fighting, whether it's your kid's birthday party. So throughout the week at a successful bowling alley like ours, like right now we're in daytime on a Thursday. Kids are in school, but older people are free. So they're bowling right now. If you put on the cameras of my bowling alley, they're there doing league bowling. It's social for them, but they're not drinking. That's not what they do. They're going to go home at an early hour to get ready for their early bird special.
They're less profitable, but you know what?
No, but they're filling it in.
Yeah, but they're filling it in. Yeah.
This
Still making
afternoon,
money.
there will be the guy that gets off of work. He's going to come in after his day job, and he'll come in and he'll bowl, and he'll have a couple of beers before he has to get up for work tomorrow, so he won't go home too late. So he'll be there maybe from 5 to 8, 5 to 7:30, whatever. And then the younger people come in. That's a regular, typical weekday.
Date night or whatever, yeah.
Date night, or a guy gets off of work as a shift as a waiter or whatever, wants to grab a beer with his friends or a girl, whatever. They'll come in at 9 and do from 9 to close.
Yeah.
So throughout the day, that bowling alley is bringing in people to the center, which then frequent the restaurants.
And some people just come in for drinks too. You have a bar there, right? So, what time do you close?
12, I think. I mean, I'm not that active, to be honest.
I know, but whatever. But maybe they come in at 9:30 and have a couple cocktails with their girl they're talking to, or
even though this generation is obviously playing more video games at home and things of that nature, the reality is people still want to be social.
Sure.
They want to get out.
Yeah.
A friend comes in town, they're not sitting on a couch playing video games. They want to go somewhere and do something.
So for the bowling alley, who manages that? I don't need a name, but I mean, who do you find? Like, how do you...
Of course.
How do you build that up, and how much time do you have to spend to get it to a point where it's on more or less autopilot?
I'm over. That opened in 10, so I'm 14 years into that first bowling alley, and we opened the billiard club 2 years later, so it's 12 years for that. But that's on cruise control now. I've got one general manager. I have 2 bowling alleys, because I did another shopping center years later. Through the success, again, success begets success. So I had the successful one, a bowling alley operator. A shopping center owner that owned a bowling alley, similar to me, but owned a crappy one, came to me and invited me to join his group. And eventually I took over the shopping center, and I own one in Stewart. So I own Stewart Bowl, Vero Bowl, and each of the bowling alleys, for the reason I told you before, have their billiard clubs associated with them.
Great.
And I have one general manager who oversees both locations, which on a revenue basis, they do about $5 million a year annual total.
Combined.
Two, yeah. And remember, they pay collectively about $1 million of that goes to rent.
That's great.
So they are, not only are they, profitable.
Even if they were more or less breaking even or just shedding a very small profit, it's still worth it for you.
100%.
Because how are you going to find another bowling alley to move in there? Or you're going to have to go spend millions of dollars to refit the place.
Now, that being said, I'll be honest, I got an offer to sell both bowling alleys to a company called Bowlmore. Bowlmore? The one that's a nationally publicly traded company, and they're the top of the heap. Okay. And they offered me a multiple, I think it's 7 times EBITDA, a kind of a thing. But at the end of the day, I don't see anything that's going to change my trajectory. There's very few. I mean, I have a moat around me. Warren Buffett talks about moats around businesses, and obviously he's talking about much bigger businesses than bowling alleys. Yeah. But there's very few people. Like if you have a small restaurant, you can get someone to come with. There'll be a competitor before long. But a bowling alley requires so many millions of dollars. It keeps the average mom and pop guy from opening one up.
That's a good point. And huge barrier to entry.
And the big boys don't want to come and do it either for the same reason. There's like Vero Beach can't handle 2 bowling alleys. It can only handle one. I have a monopoly basically. Now is it not like a monopoly like Microsoft had or something, but the point is that I don't see anything changing the trajectory. Sure. People will bowl in some way, shape, or form. I think throughout the rest of my life.
And it's so important, again, back to the type of space it is. It's so important to have a successful business in there. Sure, there's a national company, and would it likely be successful? Probably. but you also have a lot more control when it's your business.
I do.
And not that you want to be active day to day or going to empty out cash registers, once or twice a week, but you don't have to do that.
There are so many efficiencies from it.
If things started to become less efficient or there started to be some issues or HR issues, you have control over that. You could terminate someone, bring someone else in, new leadership.
That being said, I do not put a lot of time and effort into it. Now, to be honest with you, and this is a business discussion, not a real estate one, what I probably should do, and my general manager is amazing, and she has an assistant manager that is also equally amazing, and they're long-term people for me. I am very much a long-term employer. I have a very small team of the highest people that have been with, they'll never leave, I hope.
You hope.
I went around and I made them, look, people stay in jobs for two reasons typically. One is financial, reasons, and other is because they're appreciated. And I hopefully make sure that they're both.
Both. Yeah.
And they have autonomy. I don't micromanage anybody. So ultimately working for me is you're a little bit left to your own devices, good and bad. Yeah. But if I were really smart, which I've given this some thought, is I would bring in there's a level above Tammy in terms of sophistication, like an it's Bolero, that's what it is, it's Bolero. An ex-Bolero executive that wanted to move to Florida that could probably come into my $5 million or $5.5 million company and take it to 7, or, with better marketing and all the things that I just don't have the bandwidth to do. And that my general manager is so busy day to day running the day to day, she doesn't have the skill set nor the time. And so I'm probably not running it as well as it could be. It's like having a Ferrari going 50.
Yeah. I get it. You could create better efficiencies, better marketing.
But I'm okay with where it's at. It's just fine. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm lazy, but I am spread out a little bit.
Spread a little thin. So since 2010-ish, you were picking up more retail, more. Have you ever done industrial?
What happened was, so from 5, I bought the big center, 7, I bought the other big center, and then I was a retail guy from that point forward. I just knew retail.
Got it.
So I picked up the other center with Stewart in 2011, 12. But shopping centers, in my opinion, again, I'm a value guy. So we were talking offline before, that you're sitting on your hands a bit buying things because sometimes pricing is not right. And I think that's a smart move, because to buy something, what I've learned is, it's not the deal that you don't get that kills you. It's the deal that you get that you shouldn't have done. That's the one that kills you.
That's wise.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I decided not to buy any more shopping centers, because at that time, prices had come to a point where I wasn't finding value easily. But where I saw value was somewhere different. Yeah. And I was inspired by what was happening in Wynwood, and I bought a lot of properties in the downtown Fort Lauderdale area, Flagler Village, Progresso, and those areas were not what they are today in 2014, 15 when I was buying them. Also in downtown Vero Beach. So I had a new strategy now of buying these, and they weren't big shopping centers, they were more like one-offs, and each of those required a different, so I would take like an automotive use, and I would change it into a cool restaurant, or an automotive use or something into a yoga studio, and making these downtowns cooler. And I've done a pretty good job of helping to bring the downtown Fort Lauderdale area, which is my hometown, and my adopted hometown of Vero Beach. These downtowns are flourishing, partly because of the things that I did. So I didn't do all of it, but I primed the pump. I bought 6 or 8 properties, and each of those properties are really cool now. And then other people say, "Oh, look what's going on over there." And
great.
So those are.
So what exactly were they? Were they warehouse space at first?
All retail, right?
No, like one was a physical therapy office, for instance. Oh, yeah, they're all when you say retail, means when
shopping centers.
They're not in. Yeah, they're not. Or they're just buildings that are in the like in a downtown. They're not necessarily like I bought. The biggest one we'll talk about is the American Icon Brewery project. I think you know this, right?
Very cool.
Fort Lauderdale?
No, well, I own 2. So, but the real one. So, what happened was I started to be interested in downtown, and my architect said to me, "Michael, would you be interested in helping this cultural art community find a home for their office? You're a real estate guy." Yeah, okay. So I found this downtown property, not for me. I was doing it actually as a favor to help the arts community, and I found this downtown right on Main Street. And I bring it to them and said, "This is it. I had no profit, no brokerage, no nothing. Just here you go." They decided not to buy it, and I said, "Well, you're not going to buy it? Is it okay if I buy it? And so I bought this building. It was an old physical therapy building, and it had an empty piece of land to the left of it. And when I bought it, I mean, I had before and after. It's amazing what I did to it. I took the building that was 6,000 square feet, and I divided it into slivers, like 2,000, 2,000, 2,000. So I've got a really great salon on the right-hand side, 2,000. The middle is just a franchise fast sign, nothing sexy. But the left side, which is the one closest to the empty lot, is where I created real value. I had seen something in Asheville, North Carolina, where it's a 2,000 square foot restaurant, but the side facing the empty lot, I blew doors in the walls and created these glass garage doors that open up. And then on the lot, I poured concrete and put a not like a tent, but a fixed structure. So it's an indoor-outdoor concept now. So the man that's doing the restaurant, the tenant, is renting 2,000 interior, and I think double that on the patio. So it's a really successful restaurant. It's called Post and Vine. He's my tenant.
Post and Vine, of course, yeah.
Really
That's great.
cool.
Yeah.
He's killing it.
Really? I didn't know you owned that one, yeah.
Yeah, that's my building there.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I developed it, and it's doing so well. And that's what it is. So it actually, so again, I'm a partner in the sense that I'm a landlord. Sometimes in restaurants get a percentage rent.
Okay.
So the better he does, the better we do.
Great.
And so his kitchen wasn't keeping up with the he was too busy. It's a small space, so it's a small kitchen. So we co-invested into an outdoor what do you call it? A wood fire oven to make
cool.
pizzas out there.
Cool.
So his kitchen, while still the same size, has another avenue to create food outside here. And so the point is, we're not partners. He's a landlord. He's a tenant. I'm a landlord. But I'm all about, and his revenue, I don't want to disclose too much, but it went from like mid ones to like nearly 3 last year.
Wow.
For a small restaurant, $3 million, a lot of money.
That's huge. And then what does the rent look like on the outside space versus the inside? How does that? Is it flat across the board?
I don't charge at all for the
differentiate?
outside space. It's only inside space.
Got it. Okay.
But when you're getting 7% of gross, it doesn't really matter because ultimately it exceeds it's the greater of 7% of gross or whatever that number is, and it's always going to be the 7%.
Got it. Okay.
So it doesn't really matter.
So you're happy to give them that space because you're getting the gross. Yeah.
But what happened with that building, and this is the biggest, if I could tell a quick story about this one. This is the biggest fail of my life, of my business career, and it caused me such pain. I actually sat down with a therapist over it because I was in such distress over this thing in 2019 that I said, I gotta fix this, and I can't get out of my own way, and I'll tell you about it. But what happened was that building that I just told you about, when I first bought it, I had met this guy who owned a brewery called Sailfish Brewery. It's a very, very well-known brewery in the Treasure Coast. It's the first brewery, and he's a friend of mine, and he had this small little brewery at the time, and I had this building that I just bought that I just turned into Post and Vine. But before it was that, I brought him up and I said, hey, I want to show you this building. I think it's going to be a great next location for Sailfish Brewery. He comes in, he says, yeah, this is great. I see what you see. He goes, problem is I don't have any money. I said, well, listen, the building is a shell. I got to give whoever is moving in here a TI allotment of about $250,000. So, he needs I said, how much is it going to cost? He goes, I need $1 million. He told me why, and I understood. I said, well, I got to give $250,000 to anybody. So you're $250,000 of the way there. Here you go. And then I hooked him up with an SBA broker that I knew in a banker. And he was able to secure $500,000 from the SBA. So he had $750,000 just through those two mechanisms. The last $250,000, we were doing like Shark Tank, And his brewery was small. So I was like, okay, I'll give you the last $250,000 in exchange for whatever the percentage of Sailfish. We ended up not coming to terms, and I didn't handle it well. I wish I could do that over again. Sailfish is super successful now. It has gone on to amazing success, and I should have done whatever deal that I didn't do. I'm a moron. But I was not happy with the way he left me at the altar. I was mad about it. Okay. And keep in mind that I was putting $500,000 in. I was giving him the $250,000 as the angel investor, and I was giving him $250,000 as the landlord, and the $500,000 was coming from the SBA. So when he left me to go do his own thing, which went on to huge success, I go, well, who needs him? I'm going to go ahead and do my own brewery because I had all the plans, and I thought it was a great idea, so did he. And I created this idea. I spent the weekend thinking about all these cool ideas, and I came up with American Icon. And American Icon, the idea of the brewery was going to be to celebrate American iconic things, places, whether it's, we would create a Marilyn Monroe blonde beer, or, we would celebrate whether it's the Statue of Liberty, like we have a Liberty Pale Ale, and all these different things that are Americana.
Great idea.
It is a great idea.
Yeah.
And especially because, when,
Great marketing.
Huh?
Yeah, who doesn't like American?
Exactly. It's a great idea.
Pop culture.
So I'm ready to do this thing, and I'm like, I got the $1 million. I was already putting $500,000 anyway. I'll just keep the whole thing myself. I'll do my own brewery. I'll do $1 million. So I start working on it. A week or so, 2 weeks into the project, I barely did anything. There was a building about a block or so away, a very unique building. And I'm a real estate guy. How do you not notice this historic building that's sitting there, but in distress? It was a historic building that used to be, before there was FP&L in the state of Florida, they used to make electricity the old-fashioned way, which means they would bring diesel fuel on the tracks that Henry Flagler laid. They would take the diesel fuel off and put it in these huge engines like generators. They would crank them up, and it would create electricity for the 1940s Vero Beach population of 1,000 people, whatever it was. Well, fast forward, 20 years after they have this whole system going on, they bring in modern technology, and they have electricity the way we now know it. And this building sat there with all the diesel fuel, environmental issues. And the city, but it was it was historic, a brick building. You don't see anything like it. Right in downtown, right near the tracks. And they were in a lawsuit. The city was the landlord. Some developer was the tenant. And during my whole Vero life, it was always in a lawsuit. So I never thought about it. That week, to my chagrin, I get a call on a Friday afternoon. It changed my life. He said, the city settled the lawsuit. Are you going to bid on it? And I go, yes, I am. And I put the first location, the small $1 million location, on hold while I went after the larger location. They had a whole request for proposal. And, I'm a known commodity in that. And I had this great idea for American Icon. My presentation was outstanding, and I won the building. Well, that $1 million project ballooned to 6.
Oh, wow.
And I moved the project American Icon from a small thing where it would have done a gangbuster business, I'm sure, to a huge thing. And I spent the next 2 years of my life investing $6 million cash, which is a lot of money, and a lot of my ego, and a lot of things. And I didn't put the time into hiring the right person. And that guy brought me down.
Wow.
I ended up, so the building is, if you look at my career, that project, if you go to it, if you ever go up to Vero Beach, anyone going to Vero Beach, it's amazing. We turned this old building into a top of its class, a brewery, restaurant. It's amazing. But running a restaurant is not for the faint of heart. It is very difficult. Running a brewery is not. And I have ADD. I don't want to run these things. So I hired this, 6-figure type employee through a headhunter that specializes in this. And I didn't do background checks, and it bit me like badly. Wow. Because by the time I realized what I had done, he had created chaos within the organization. He had bad culture, everything that's the opposite of the way I operate, And I couldn't. We were in a death spiral, and
you were dependent on him.
Oh, when I got rid of him, what he did, which I understand it from his strategic point of view, he's like Vladimir Putin, when he became the president of Russia in 1999, whatever, he immediately started putting his cronies into the different positions. So you can't get rid of him. So this guy went ahead and brought in all his family members. They had different last names, so I never noticed it on the payroll. Not that I'm looking at payroll, but it wasn't like I knew that his sister was working for us. He didn't disclose it, at least.
Wow.
So when I fired him, I didn't just fire him. I gutted our staff.
Oh, man.
And I have no skill. As bad of a chiropractor as I am, I'm a worse restaurant operator. And so 2018 and 19 was distressful because not only were like I said, my ego was tied up into it. We were losing money. It was hemorrhaging money. And I'm a successful guy, but no one likes writing big checks every month, especially when you're not enjoying it. Writing a big check to build something fun is great, but writing a big check. So I came into 2020 with, frankly, a new point of view. I said, I got to do something here. Like I'm such an optimistic guy, and 19 was like the hardest of I was 49 at the time, the hardest of my 49 years by far. I got to change something, and I went into 2020 with a new kind of a plan. Of course, COVID started like 2 months into it.
Yeah, yeah.
But I eventually
Punch
was
for the gut.
successfully able to find some great people to run it. And they have stabilized this company, and I'm no longer the majority owner of the company. I had to relinquish that, which hurts in a way because I was very proud of it. I'm still a partner in it, and I'm still the landlord of it.
Yeah.
But the day-to-day operations are no longer my responsibility.
Okay.
So
Would you say a hit to your ego, a hit to your pocketbook, to your wallet, but
Stress.
any challenge, stress,
Time.
I'm sure
you
that
could
you
have
can't
bought
get back.
a lot of assets during that time with that $6 million, right?
Absolutely. Oh God, because remember that in
18,
order for me
19?
to come up with that kind of capital, I didn't have that liquid cash. I had some in stocks that I had to sell that I never sell anything. I don't sell stocks. I'm a long-term buy and hold, dollar cost averaging investor. Well, of course, my timing was awful because I sold things I think it was, I guess it was, when was it, 17? And of course, the market just only went higher. So whatever I had to
Like 7
liquidate,
years,
it
it's
was
off to the races.
It was not a great time.
Yeah, I get that. But thank you for sharing the challenge you had here, a big challenge. What was the learning lessons that you got from that, though? Because life is filled with punches to the gut and slaps to the face. So
there's so many, honestly. The negotiation I had with the Sailfish Brewery owner was me being my hubris a little bit. I was in a position of strength, and I overplayed my hand, so to speak.
Okay.
And had I done that successfully, I never would have gotten into the American Icon situation, because I would have been a partner in Sailfish, and would have been I would have been an absentee or minority owner of a great brewery called Sailfish. That was one of my lessons.
And that seems to be, except I would say one of the things I'm hearing here is maybe focus on being a landlord, being a minority owner in a business, getting the passive income, and not spending your time being an actual owner-operator, except your bowling alleys. Those you've had success in. So it's not an across-the-board rule.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's a good
like,
question.
how do you differentiate the two? Your success with 2 bowling alleys that you are now passive income. You also, even the chiropractor business, although you are a chiropractor, you are very passive in that. You found a partner to operate those. So I'd say you have at least 2 successful businesses there. And then
it's a good question, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I have the answer for it. I don't know. I don't have a particular rhyme or reason for how I do things. If it feels right, I guess is how I would say it.
Got it.
I misread this one man. I would say that, again, I don't do background checks on a lot of, I've never been a good interviewer. I tend to, to hire from a gut instinct. I think I've done a pretty good job over the course of bringing in quality people that are part of the culture and all that. But I'm not without fault, and I didn't see this one.
we've had our share of bad hires. I don't know about you, Larry.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of bad hires. And normally it's, looking back on it, it's the ones that have the best interviews. The ones that come in there and they're selling you. They sell you on this dream.
I don't disagree with
They have
that.
a lot of practice at interviewing.
Yeah, they do. Right, exactly. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, so my team, who protect me because I'm a good person, I like to think, and they don't let me interview anymore.
No.
They literally have just taken that. Like, I kind of like it, talking to people, and
Sure.
but
Because sometimes I've learned I'm selling myself.
Me too.
I'm like, I like the idea of this person, and I really don't want to do 10 more interviews. So I'm trying to find all the great things about them instead of doing the opposite, challenging them in the interview.
Of course. What would happen? Right.
What would happen in this situation? What about this? Yeah.
I want to be liked.
Yeah.
And then I get into coming out. You like the Dolphins? You're hired. I will do things like And my interviews tend to go on for hours, and they're just terrible.
So you fired yourself from hiring. So
they fired me from hiring, and that's been a good thing.
Good.
It's so that's been good.
But that you've got that albatross more or less off your back. You're a minority owner in the business, passive, and it's paying good rent now. Is it?
Yeah, it's solid. Yeah, I mean it's a solid. It's not. I wouldn't again grading things. It's not a superstar
It's not an
everything.
A+
It's
deal, but
it's one of those things where where, again, if you saw it, you'd understand how special of a property it is for me when I go to it. And, I've been doing some estate planning and things of that nature. And I had to write a letter to my daughters like, hey, if I'm not here, you're reading this letter. And, here's what to sell and here's what to keep. And I would have her keep that, not so much because it's such a great investment in terms of like pound for pound, like the mobile home park is, but it's got other things going for it that I think would speak to just, I think it'll be there. If you come back in 50 years from now, it'll be there. Okay. It's that kind of it's got that kind of a future to it, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's like a landmark.
It really is. Yeah. And if you go to like a TripAdvisor or anything like that, American Icon, and it's called the historic diesel plant, is like, it's not number one, it's number two, like things to do.
Yeah.
It's that kind of a thing. It's it's a landmark. It's a very special thing. It really is. And as downtown Vero continues to grow, it'll be even more of a landmark.
Agreed.
In 10 or 20 years, or when I'm no longer here, whenever that is.
Yeah. Great. Any other, lessons without having to, drag you to force us to go through a long story, but things that you've, learned in your career?
So I kind of told you about, my initial phase of smaller properties. I sort of glossed over a little bit some of the things I've done in the shopping centers, which is the lion's share of like my 35 to 45, let's call it. And then probably by 45 to now, I got into the downtown urban. But in the last time I turned 50, there's been another evolution for me where I wanted to slow down even more. And I don't only slow down, I enjoy working a lot. And I just wanted to be able to do it on my own terms.
Sure, exactly.
I was historically that first guy in, like the boss. I dropped my daughter off at school. I'd go right to the office. I was really the first person there, and I was usually last one to leave. For most of my career, I'm no longer that guy. Mm-hmm. I'm working from home, and I'll come in a little later after, I'm just changing my hours, but I'm still doing. What I also wanted to do is I wanted to put my capital, which I have, when you're younger, you have more time than capital. As you get older, you have more capital than time. So I'm kind of reallocating my assets. And I also was very centered around Florida, kind of like I told you about how I like the clinical business outside of Florida to kind of give me some diversity.
Diversification, yeah.
I recognize that in the event of a catastrophe in Florida, whether it's a hurricane or what have you, I was very, very heavy here. And so the last couple of years, with that in mind, I've now moved into a new phase, which I'm leaving right now, which I'll tell you in a minute, a new phase where a couple of years where I just started putting money into limited partnerships as people that I knew and respect. They got me into asset classes that I wouldn't otherwise be in. So I didn't have exposure to multifamily, but by me investing into a multifamily project that I'm not the one running it, it's not my day-to-day.
Sure. You're not the GP. You're not the general partner. You're the
I'm an LP, and I also got geographic diversity, so that multifamily might be in the Midwest.
Sure.
I did some industrial in different areas, retail, which I know obviously very well in different areas. So I've exposed myself to other asset classes and other geographic areas. That being said, I've learned a thing or two about that as well in terms of I at first I was squeamish to put money behind. When it's my investment, I was willing to write a bigger check. When it was someone else's, I'm like, I got a little dinosaur armed a little bit on it. I've learned to change that a bit. So because what happened was I was trying to put a decent amount of money to work, and I was doing too small. And the last thing you want is like 20 properties, or 20 projects. So I started to go higher in my incremental contribution to each of those, and that's been better for me. That I'm just selecting less quantity, higher quality projects to invest into. And that's
So you'll vet them more. So you might go check out 3 or 4 presentations or offering memorandums and listen to their presentations, and then you pick one, but you'll put a bigger check.
Well, I don't know if you know that term FOMO, fear of missing out.
Sure.
Like, I feel that way in a business thing. I'm like, I always want to be a part of everything. Hey, I like it. I just want to be in. So I felt, again, kind of like wanting to be liked. It's like, I felt that and that's a lesson for me. I have to not be so concerned with, I don't like saying no to some young, hungry, with integrity entrepreneur, but in my past, I would say, I'll go ahead and contribute a lower amount just to kind of satisfy that way. I could say yes to him or her. But now I'm, I guess, getting more and more comfortable saying no.
Okay, good. Good. That's when you have a pleaser type personality. I had those challenges too in my younger years, but the power of no, polite no, can actually be self-empowering. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And that's been it's actually a mantra of mine now of quality over quantity.
Yeah.
And that goes everything from literally clothes, where I used to go out and buy 2 okay shirts. Now I'll spend more money on one good piece of garment of clothing and take care of that piece of clothing, if that makes any sense. And I have less things in my closet, but they're all nice
things you like.
Stuff.
Yeah, they're all things I like. They represent me better, and that's been sort of a driving force in my life on business, personal levels as well. So,
and then just to leave it, where are you going from here? What's the next stage? You're leaving that stage, you said, but
I am. I'm in a new one because what happened was I frankly I went too far to the absentee. It's like people that I didn't retire ever, but it's like people who do retire and they start playing golf and they're like, all right, well, this sounds great. And then they start doing it every day and they're like, okay, well, this is getting a little...
You missed the game. Yeah,
I missed the game. So I actually, I got involved in a new thing, and it's in Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay. And I am very excited about the future of this. It's downtown Las Vegas, and I don't know if anyone knows Las Vegas, but there's a company called Zappos. Zappos.com is a shoe company.
Oh, yeah.
And it
Owned
was
by Amazon, no?
Say again? They were bought by Amazon. They were. Yeah. So the founder of that company is this really exceptional man who passed away 4 years ago, and a terrible, tragic story. But I had read the story, never really had any involvement with him or any of the story, but I didn't realize at the time he had gone and moved Zappos' headquarters to downtown Las Vegas about maybe 10 years ago. And he had this vision, and he's a visionary. And he spent a chunk of his fortune, I'm talking $350 million or so, buying a lot of properties, and each one was like a value add, change this community kind of thing. So the city was obviously on board with supporting him and all his things. So he bought up a lot, and then unfortunately his life derailed with drugs and psychosis and whatnot. And when he died, all of his properties went into a probate type situation. I'm talking like 100 different properties, some cash flowing, some just lots of land. And it hindered the development future because when a huge property owner and nothing can transact, there was no development going on, but they're now coming out of this and they're just selling the first tranche of his properties. And I'm a big believer in the downtown. And these 100 will yield more than 100 because what will happen is other developers, kind of like what I did where you prime the pump.
Transform an area.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I very much believe in this area, and there's it's just so many things going on down there. So I've got 2 properties that I'm working on there, properties, and it's giving me a chance, like when I bought that first property back in the day, in Vero, it gave me an excuse to go to Vero. And then once I was in Vero, my nature is to be curious and talk to brokers and just look around. So by me being in Las Vegas more, I'm now talking to brokers, and I have a feeling that I'll end up, although I have 2, it'll become 10 within a couple of years.
Knowing you. Knowing Mike Rechter.
But I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying
it's a new challenge.
It's a new challenge.
A new chapter.
And I'll be honest, I'm going to Las Vegas. I've been there 3 times in the last maybe 4 months. Haven't gambled $1. Yeah. Like I'm there and I'm doing it, and I'm enjoying Las Vegas in a totally different way than I did when I was in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, where I'm not partying. I mean, I'll go out for nice dinners and things of that nature, but I've got a chance to see the Grand Canyon, by being out there and had some time to explore the part of our country that I'd never seen before. So
Yeah, I think the last time I went to Vegas was we went to a couple shows, and I didn't do any nightclubs, and it was a whole different scene, and it's nice. It's good. Good restaurants, good food. Good,
exactly. And again, and then you throw in the fact that there's actually a business opportunity that is unlike anything I've seen. It's opportunistically, and again, you know me by now from the story that I'm a value guy, so I don't go anywhere unless I see value.
And that could also lead you to other West Coast opportunities because Vegas is just the stepbrother, stepsister of Los Angeles, or Arizona. So,
it also brings me to the final. I've never done this. Now, obviously, I've been investing in other people's deals, LP and other, and I know so many people that syndicate and whatnot. But the downtown area has such opportunity, in my view, that I'm gonna, like the thing that happened when I was raising money with my family for that one center I told you about earlier. If I were to buy, let's use a number, $50 or maybe $100 million of downtown property with a real position there. And you need to come up with, again, back to my earlier thing, where you need 20 to 30% of that. So on 50 million, you need 10 to 15 in cash. On 100, you need double that. I will run out of money quickly, and I may, for the first time in my life, create an opportunity for friends and family to join me alongside me and do it in a bigger way than I've ever done. Now, I never want to take anyone's money unless I
believe it.
You
have to truly believe
especially at this point in my career, the last thing I want is people mad at me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I kind of like the idea of it.
That's cool.
Kind of scares me a bit, kind of like borrowing the car, and how I have to be with my own thing. Not that if I lose money, I'm happy, but if I lose money, it's my problem. But if I lose your money, that would be.
I get it, but that's a couple things I'd say to that is, number one, you have a track record of success. I mean, did you have the one major challenge with the brewery, but it still turned into a successful brewery. It's paying rent. So you're not a guy that has a track record of failure. And number two, from the investor's perspective, I mean, this, Larry, right now, what do we invest in? As far as real estate, it's really difficult, especially people over here on the East Coast and certainly here in Florida. Finding good deals is very challenging. So you're actually doing people a favor by bringing them in on a deal that you are passionate about and you believe in. And I think you'll get a lot of interest in that.
I agree, and that's why I'm thinking about it. I guess the other, if there's a big, is just answering to other people.
That's a pain. Sure. Yeah, sure.
You know what I mean?
That's a
So I don't have to do that right now, and the thought of that might be the driving force.
I think you just structure it in a way that suits you. You know what I mean?
Correct. And I have seen structures where someone says, listen, you're giving them money, you have no say in anything, and just, I'll send you a report from time to time, exactly, and just let me do my thing.
You get a quarterly report and maybe a 30-minute phone call every 3 months.
It's something like that. Yeah, I would have to do it under my terms that will fit the way that I operate, but at the same time, I don't want, I don't want to create anyone
But it's also choosing who your investors are.
That's also it.
I wouldn't go shop it. You have so many connections of people who are successful at this point in your life, in your career. I wouldn't shop it to random people on the street.
I wouldn't. Shop
it to those people that are not going to be pains in the rear end, that they know you personally, they trust you, they're not micromanagers.
100%. And I also I wouldn't want to do, if I did a fairly big number, the last thing I would want is like so many people. I'd have to be significant contributors. I just,
minimum $500,000 or
or whatever that number is. $500,000 or $250,000. But 50s or that'll be.
No. That'll
be painful.
Yeah. That would be painful. Yeah. No, this is great. Any other questions of Mike?
Great.
Yeah. You've got a very impressive story.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. It's funny. I don't do this introspective thing a lot, and I found it both enjoyable and learning from me. I think I'll actually take away something from it. And of course, obviously there are people listening to this, and I'm. And I think I mentioned this to you. One of my aspirations in my next part is teaching. My mom was a teacher, and I've enjoyed teaching what I've learned in a format. So this is enjoyable for me, and hopefully someone can listen to it and get some information, get one thing, as they say, from it, and be able to.
You should do that. You've got the right personality and the right experience and the right heart to do that. You should mentor people, however that looks. I don't know exactly whether that's periodically speaking in front of investor clubs or whatever it is, but you have an inspirational story, and hearing someone who's had a track record of success like you have really does motivate people. You've motivated me here.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to start looking at retail deals.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. But
I appreciate that. Yeah, so that's kind of, so this was actually a way to sort of give back, if that makes any sense, to whoever's listening that can, look at it and say, I can do this, I mean, because I can tell you right now, it's not because I'm that intelligent.
You are.
I'm smart enough, but I mean, at the same time, it's really just a bunch of work and continual learning, being curious, and I think that has been probably the biggest driver of whatever I've achieved. It's just being curious and not being okay with just taking an answer and being like, oh, okay, that's what the answer is. Let me understand how that got there.
The why.
The why.
It's the whys. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you look at different people across the spectrum that are successful, they're all curious. They're intellectually curious.
Yes.
They're questioning things, and they're not just taking it for rote, and they're always kind of continually learning.
Yeah, you share that with Larry. Larry's a big why guy.
Yeah,
so
totally.
I think I am too.
I can see that, Larry. I met you, recently, and I can see that. And I know
the
you
Talk to
well.
my partner Conrad, and he would, he'd tell you the whys get very frustrating after a while.
Yeah.
So, but good.
Well,
Listen,
thanks,
this was great, Mike. All the best. Looking forward to growing our friendship, and thanks for being here today.
Yeah,
My
thank you.
pleasure. And Larry,
Yeah,
thank you
pleasure
very
meeting
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jerron.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe.